afternoon, everybody. Really good to see you all. Thanks for coming along this afternoon. So this is our very first Education Leadership Academy seminar for 2023. And what we're doing today is a little bit different to what we've done with every seminar since the very first with Sir David Carter, which is going back about 3-4 years now. Now, regulars will know that Ava Sturridge-Packer has chaired every single seminar up to date in her unique way. So make what you will of that, those of you who know Ava. We thought, all of us at the university here, it was high time that Ava herself presented the seminar and shared with us all her leadership journey, because we've had snippets of it at various points when you've been talking with David Carter, Steve Mumby, Rosemary, Alison, all along the way. So today I'm delighted to introduce Ava as our presenter and our chair for the afternoon, Mr. Sukhbir Farrar, currently interim executive principal at Waverley Education Foundation. For those, most of you will know Birmingham, but if you don't know Birmingham, Waverley is in the east end of the city. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sukhbir, who will introduce the setting and his long-standing friend and colleague, Ava. Over to you, Sukhbir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon all. I was very honoured to start off with when Colin asked me to chair this forum this evening, particularly when he gave me the context and who it was all about. Just a little bit about our journey. I've known Ava for over 20 years. I used to work at Hampstead Hall School, which is now Hampstead Hall Academy. I started there as a newly qualified teacher a long time ago. And on my timetable, I used to have a slot for primary liaison. And in my spare time, bamboo dancing was something I was very, very passionate about and involved in. And I remember going to local primary schools in the area, and I'd heard about St Mary's. I had a rough idea where St Mary's was, but never really went there. So when I got there and I first met Ava and introduced myself, I was a lot younger then, I've got to say.
But always handsome.
And I said, oh, Ava, you know, is there any chance you'd like to come in and do some bamboo dancing with the children? And straight away we struck it off. I soon very quickly realised Ava's passion and love for performing arts, and really our partnership, both as on a professional and friendship level, just blossomed. We did a lot of concerts at school, performing arts concerts, and Ava and St Mary's always took part. And I've got to say, the standard of their performances was always very, very high. And if any of you have ever went to one of the dance concerts that Ava annually held, you will know the quality of performances which stem from Ava's own passion, but also the high standards she's always set for herself and the students in her care. So I ain't going to say much more than that, other than Ava, it's an absolute pleasure to hear your journey and to be sitting here as part of this great forum to introduce you. So I will hand over at the end if there are any questions, and we'll be more than happy to take.
Oh, thank you so much for being my friend and a genuine friend. You know, along the way, we get people who are around us, but actually their hearts aren't with us. And I can honestly say I've got two people here this evening, Colin and Sukhbir, who I feel have my heart in their hands. So thank you both. Oops. There I go. I'd like to say good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. There have been some recent tragedies in the West Midlands. First of all, we've had those little boys who drowned, and more recently, a teenager who sadly took her life in Sutton Park. And I really think it's important that we should give our condolences to all those who are in the grieving process. My heart goes out to their families, their friends, their schools, communities, and let's keep them in our hearts this evening. As Sukhbir and Colin said, I'm at Sturridge-Packer. I've got 6 younger brothers in our family. You either teach or play football, and I'll leave that comment just there at the side. There's a very important point for me that I want to make, and that is that this seminar isn't a pity party for global majority people, or a demonstration of being anti-white British. You've got to be really patient with me, because what you'll find this evening is that I will change my terminology as it suits. And if I could just put in your heads to start with, when I was 5 and in school, I was called a coloured girl. So that puts into context all the different phrases that have been used to describe me. And very recently, Rosemary Campbell-Stevens talked about referring to the global majority. And I like that, and it's sitting nice with me at the moment. If my dad was here, that would be a different thing. Many years ago, Dad was doing an insurance form, and he said, Ava, we're not on here. And I said, what do you mean, Dad? He said, I'm seeing this Afro-Caribbean, this and that. I said, that's us, Dad. He said, no, I'm Jamaican. So just to put into context, all these terminologies, they don't ask the people, it just seems to happen, and we accept it. So just to put that into context. I just want to simply do my lived experience this evening, my story, and I hope it will resonate with different people, both the global majority and white British. And I want people to reflect on where they feel they are in their own personal journey. The war in Ukraine has resulted in a new wave of migrants and refugees from Ukraine, who one day will also have their own stories to tell. And I was very pleased that on the 22nd of June last year, there was an unveiling ceremony at Waterloo Station for the Windrush time, marking the 74th anniversary of the arrival of Empire Windrush, which brought Caribbean migrants to Britain from 1948 onwards. I've got to say, someone once said to me, did you come on the Windrush? And I was very insulted, because at that point I hadn't realised it was a period of time and not just a small time slot. So there you go. In Birmingham on the 22nd of June, we had a linked ceremony outside New Street Station, and it was part of the celebration of the unveiling in London. I was really fortunate, as I was asked to find 3 Birmingham schools who could be part of the ceremony, and I was able to do so, and it was a wonderful occasion, and it brought tears to my eyes, because I wished my mum, who's now sadly passed away, would have been here to see that recognition of the Windrush. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but a recent change in legislation, and I think it's from this year, I'm not sure if it's January or February this year, the DfE will recognise teaching qualifications from Jamaica. And what you've got to understand is, in that time of the Windrush migration, there were Jamaican teachers who came here but could not teach because their qualifications were not recognised. And look how many years it's taken for that change to happen. And I really personally want to celebrate that. So over the years, for you who are leaders and have been leaders for a long time, you may have had teaching assistants who actually were qualified in Jamaica but could not practice and had to retrain in order to be recognised. I'm just going to say a few words from an extract from a poem, and it's by Tracy O'Selberco. I don't know where I found this from, I stumbled on it. When invited, they came for you. After war broke your country, they helped you through. So they helped you rebuild, they arrived on your shores to be your manufacturers and assistants in your stores. Their usefulness and their presence became a never-ending debate, and they were constantly subjected to animosity and hate. And that's the context in which I came to England as a child. At that point, and I'll just I've been allowed to touch technology. Joe Broadfield, if you're out there in the audience, please bear with me. And there you've got my passport photograph of when I was 5 years old. You can see how old it is because you can see it's been around a lot. But there was a big recruitment, particularly in Jamaica, to get workers over from the Caribbean. And my dad was recruited because he was already a qualified motor mechanic and he came to work with British Rail. And just to say, my dad worked for British Rail from the age of 19 until in his 70s. They changed ownership many years, but Dad kept his contract. And he's even proud today to say when he goes on the railway, he has a special ticket that says he was a previous employee that gives him, you know, a free seat. So, and another little thing I want to say is that over the years, I've seen documentation and things on the television where they talk about, particularly the Caribbean men, work shy. My dad was not work shy. He worked really hard and he instilled in us, his children, the boys and myself, work ethics, about working hard and having that self-respect for yourself and being responsible for yourself and not really expecting any handouts from anyone. So I just really want to make that point because I've read in so many different documents, you know, the absent fathers, you know, the work shy men. There are a lot of men like our dad who came to this country and worked really hard in different industries, in factories, and they've never been congratulated. And if I could do something to have some sort of a recognition for those men and women who came when they were called. I remember saying to a girl at school once, she said, "Why have you all come over here to our country?" And I said, "Because my mother had trained me very well. We were called to come and help." She said, "Not all of you. Why have you all come?" And I kind of, you know, swallowed a bit and I said, "Oh, I thought it was an open invitation to all of us. And actually we were British citizens and that's why we came." Well, my mum and dad, very colourful characters. They eloped, left me as a baby, 10 months old. So I lived with my grandma and my auntie Norma, who took on the role of being my mum until I was 5 years old. I've got to make the point that this was not unusual in the Windrush era for children. There were lots of children like me who came over. Their parents had left them to set up home here in Britain, and they would send for them later. Many children were left in the Caribbean with relatives while their parents migrated. And the parents were very instrumental in thinking they were going to get a better life. And one of the nuggets about England in particular was free education also. That's what they thought, because in the Caribbean you had to pay for education. And I certainly, before I came to school in England, had private education. It wasn't like Balliol or anything posh like that, you know, it was a little woman round the corner, albeit it was still education that I would get. So I came to England at 5 years old on an aeroplane, all alone, with my big label with my name on it, and an adult that I didn't know who was paid to keep an eye on me on the plane. I arrived at the beginning of the academic year in school when Millie Small was #2 in the charts. I think is a little bit further on in the British charts. And we've just flicked through very quickly. If we could just go back a little bit, please, Nikki, and a little bit back from that. There's my dad, there's our dad, all 7 of us, mother and father the same, bless him, always a charmer.
Just want to stop the kids around.
Joe, it is not my fault.
Watching.
So there's my dad, bless him. My dad is still alive and now fully retired. It was quite a big deal for him to give up work actually, but he's now fully retired. If we could move that on then, please, Nikki. There's my mum, that's her passport photo. I couldn't find Dad's. There's my mum and myself in Jamaica at a wedding. My mum was very much a lady, very glamorous, very poised, very, you know, eloquent. And there she is. She was a wine waitress at one point, and there she is having a glass of wine. And that bottom picture of us both in our very nice hats was the last family wedding that Mum was able to attend, because for recent years Mum had vascular dementia, and it was quite a hard time. She'd like to put on a little bit. Okay, now look at that lady on with the car. That's Granny Henry. So this was the order of our family. Dad came first, then Mum, then Granny Henry, and you didn't mess with Granny Henry, let me tell you that. I'm trying to remember a compliment that Granny Henry ever gave me, but she wasn't that sort of woman. However, very hardworking, came over and worked in the hospital. She worked at Dudley Road Hospital for many, many years and retired in her 60s, and everybody knew her. So, you know, I'm really proud of Granny, and there's Granny and Mum again in Jamaica having holiday time. They had some fun because my brother Dean, I know one occasion they went on a cruise together and they had holidays together that, you know, he was able to organise and pay for. So that is really nice. And here we have my very first school, Anglesey Primary School, where I attended at first. I have to say, my parents were wise actually, because from Jamaica, they made the decision that I would come to school in time to start the British education system. And not all parents thought of that, and therefore we had lots of children coming to this country at various stages of their education. And some of those children, sadly, I saw a documentary, I think a year ago, my brother brought it to my attention, my brother David, where a lot of these children were put into special schools because they didn't speak standard English, they spoke Creole patois, and they didn't easily conform to the British system. So I sit here being very lucky and appreciating how lucky I was. A few years ago, there was a scandal about British citizenship, which involved Theresa May. And again, I was reminded of how lucky I was, because some children arrived in the country on their parents' passports and were later deported. And some people who paid their taxes, their national insurance, etc., were still not recognised as British citizens. My mum and dad decided when I was 10 years old to actually apply and make me a British citizen. So again, you know, my parents were savvy and they saved me. And there we are, my first experience of school at Anglesey in Lozells. I was very homesick, bewildered, crying all the time, bedwetting, very distressed. And in fact, at some point, I even lost my hair. I was so distressed, because what you've got to think is I was left as a baby and came over to my parents, who I actually hadn't got a bond with and didn't know. And, you know, they worked hard, and they must have been very patient with me, because I must have been quite, you know, a handful to handle. But my memories of Anglesey infants is a colourless lump called plasticine, which you had to work with. And then sometimes you had to make an object, sometimes you had to tell a whole story. Well, you can imagine I just sat there and I did nothing, because I thought, what's going on? And then there was another experience that's very vivid in my mind of copying my name over and over and over again in the infant classroom in reception. And I was so infuriated inside, because I could write my name by memory. And there they were, sort of not early years practitioners out there, not recognising where that child was and not appreciating assessment for learning and finding out where they needed to move to next. Horror of horrors. I also remember having to go to sleep in the afternoon on this bed. And I mean, again, traumatised, and I must have been quite a disaffected child as an infant child. However, as a child in Jamaica, I was bright, I was bubbly, I was confident, I could recite from Genesis to Exodus in the Bible, I could spell, I could read, but none of those things actually kind of aligned to what was happening to me in my primary school. I moved on from there. It's all right, you don't need to look for another one. And I went to Chilwell Croft Primary School, which was then called William Cowper. I loved it there. We got promoted as a family in housing quarters because we moved from a 2-bedroom rented accommodation where we shared a house with lots of families with their own aspirations. The weirdest thing that I remember about that house, and it was in Church Street, Low Zells, was the fact that there was a piano in one of the rooms, and the other thing, there was a fish pond in the garden, and I was kind of like never quite got my head to how this happened and how all these families, and I think there was 5 of us, lived there, shared the same kitchen and the same bathroom, and rubbed along together. When I was at William Cowper, I loved the school because I got nurturing, caring, loving teachers. One of them was, I can remember his name now, Mr. Dixon, absolutely loved us. What I remember about that experience particularly was the Asian heritage and Caribbean heritage children. We were in sets in the classroom, and we knew, like kids do, who was a top group, who was across the classroom. We were the top group, so our self-esteem was high because we were nurtured and recognised and celebrated. The thing is, I remember sitting next to these children, and I remember they all got to grammar school, and I took the 11 plus, and sadly I just got too nervous. Why wouldn't you get nervous if your mum buys you a whole new wardrobe of clothes just for the exam? Because that's what they did in Jamaica. So I had all these new clothes on that I couldn't spoil, and then I went into the exam and I didn't perform very well at all. But the interesting thing I remember is that all my table, those group of children, actually all passed their 11 plus and went to grammar school. I remember Mum in particular being gutted, and I could never work out, was Mum gutted because she was so disappointed, because we got this mantra in our house about education is the route to success, and you know, that is the way forward, and the grammar school exam was your first step, and I didn't make my first step, so it was quite a hard time. I felt as if there was a big cloud over the house, and you know, that I'd really let people down. But then I went to Perry Beach Secondary School. I don't know whether that's called Perry Beaches anymore, actually. And again, that was an interesting experience, and my early years was quite hard, quite an ordeal. I was very, very unhappy there. It didn't help that the classes were put in sets, and coming from a primary school where actually your ethnicity didn't seem to be a barrier of success, I went to a secondary school where they had sets and I was the only black person in the top set, and the other children were at lower sets, and that alienated me from them, but equally from the white British children as well. So for me, it was quite a challenging time in terms of peer group. Halfway through my secondary school, we had a new head teacher who believed in mixability. That helped me a lot, because then I mixed with everybody, and I wasn't this girl in a class that was isolated and where some people didn't want to play with me in the playground who were from my heritage, because I was in this class that was up there. And actually, I can remember what it's called. It was called Upper 1A. I mean, how much more pompous could you have got in labelling children? So that was a really hard time. But I did have 2 teachers who were fundamental in my life. It was a French teacher, and it was the RE teacher. So they were I don't know what they saw in me, because I don't think I was particularly functional at secondary school, actually. I think I was very much disappointment to my parents. And I remember my mum going in on parents' evening and daring to have an argument with the maths teacher, because I was in the top set for maths. And she said something like that, Ava's not that strong at her English is her strength. And he said, well, that's how it is here. And she said, well, why don't you move her down a set, actually, because she might do better, sort of, you know, being able to feel that she was competent and it would help her confidence. But he wouldn't listen. That was probably the first time I saw my mum really challenge the education system. She missed an opportunity, though, when I went to Anglesey Primary. I went to Anglesey Primary called Ava. I was called Ava until I was 5. It was Ava Gardner in Jamaica, not Ava Gardner, and that's who I was named. So don't laugh, Ava Gardner, and sorry, and what was the other? Marilyn Monroe. That was it. So my name was Ava Marilyn. God help me. And so, you know, I got these names and I went to school and I came home that evening and I said, you've got my name wrong. And like, you know, my dad would look furtively and my mum would, you know, she'd look, Barbara Sturridge was a force to be contended with. What do you mean? And I said, well, when I went to school, they said my name was Ava. And from that day, I was known as Ava. So that also tells you the power of schools and how they can influence children. I refused to be called Ava after that day because I went to school and that's what they said. And that shows the power we have as practitioners, head teachers, classroom assistants, teachers on those children. The next time that I had quite a difficult conversation, and as I said, my secondary school experience was not positive. I went to the careers teacher and my mum had given me the script. Ava, you are going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And I said, Mum, I don't want to be a doctor because I'm scared of blood and all those operations. She said, well, you better stick to being a lawyer then. So I very proudly went to my careers teacher and she said, oh, what would you want to be, Ava? And I said, well, I'd like to be a lawyer, a solicitor. And she said, but our good coloured girls always go into nursing. Now, I didn't want to be a nurse. Nursing wasn't good enough. You know, it's hailed as a wonderful profession, but it was that comment she made, our good coloured girls. And that, to me, was a real, you know, put down, you know, put yourself, and it was almost like there's a ceiling and we decide what that ceiling is and we decide what profession you go into. So, you know, it was hard. Now, I have to say, another disappointment, and this is why when Colin asked me to do this, I said, oh, I don't want to disappoint you. The thing is, I disappointed my mum and dad not passing the 11 plus. Then I went through secondary and I was okay and got GCSEs. And then it came to A levels and I actually got as far as a place in law school, but I had to get certain A level grades and I didn't get them. So sadly, again, you know, it was kind of, you know, I won't say the curtains didn't open, but it was a bit of a disappointment and a doom and gloom. And remembering that I was the oldest of the children, I was the one that was supposed to set the bar for my brothers in terms of education, because the mantra very much was in our house, education changes your life. So I don't know how it happened, by some twists and turns. I went to a careers officer because if you wanted to get a job, you also had to go to the careers service. And he talked me into signing up for teacher training. He said something like, have you ever thought about that? I don't know whether he got a backhander from the college or what, but he sort of said, have you ever thought about teacher? And I said, oh no, I think I quite like it. But in the end, he talked me into signing up for Newman College to do their teacher training course. The interesting thing about that was, I remember the day of the interview at Newman College, my mum nearly burst into song. Now, the reason she nearly burst into song was not the building, was nothing. She saw a lot of clergy with their dog collars on, and she said, this will be a nice place for you, Ava. Because my mum's absolute dread and horror was that, you know, there were girls in our rows who got pregnant out of wedlock, and to mum, an absolute thing for me was, you know, do not get pregnant before you're married. And best contraceptive you could ever have, really, was my mother sort of saying that. So I then went on the crusade to go to lots of interviews for to be a French teacher because I was trained to be a secondary French teacher. I think it was okay, not brilliant, but I certainly didn't get through the interviews. And I finally got a supply job. And then I remember the phone call, and the head said, "Oh, would you like to come?" And I was thinking, I don't care if you're a school of correction for children in Borstal, I want to come and work with you. And this head asked me to come the next day. I did say to him at the time, "I'm not primary, I'm actually secondary." And he said, "Don't worry, you know, I'll look after you." So Little London Primary School in Willenhall was my first school. And there I am in the corner with a Lady Diana blouse and ruffles at the neck, because it was that period of time. I had no idea about primary education, but what I had got was someone who, as a head teacher, nurtured me for weeks, who somehow saw something in me that he wanted to bring out. I don't know whether, you know, you can see there's one of the staff who is Asian heritage, and she was one of the teaching assistants. He was an amazing man, absolutely amazing to me. I was there for about 8 weeks, and then the teacher that I was covering for came back to school, and I thought, oh, my life is over again, back to, you know, nothing. And then he said, "I've got a mate round the corner at Clothy Street Primary School, and he wants to cover teacher because his deputy's broken his arm." I said, "But have you told him I'm not primary?" And he sort of said, "Yes, he'll look after you." So I ended up at Clothy Street Primary School, where the head teacher there was like head teachers are today. Actually, he was way ahead of his time. He was in the classroom, he was checking the planning, he was in and out, he was looking at your books. And that was my sort of introit to primary teaching, because I had a head like that. Sadly, and I feel sad about this, that when I was leaving, he invited me and my husband to dinner at his house. And you know what? I didn't go because I was too scared to go, because I didn't want to let him down with his family. And that's one of my big regrets from years ago. And then my first permanent job, Shaw Hill in Birmingham. I don't think I've got a picture of that. And another amazing head teacher, Jim Carr, who sadly passed away now. And he was the first to appoint me as a permanent teacher. But when he phoned me to offer me an interview, my reply was, "I need to tell you something." And he said, "Well," I don't know what he thought I was going to say. "Well, what do you need to tell me?" "I need to tell you that I am black." He laughed raucously and he said, "No issue with me about that, or my school. Absolutely no problem at all." And, you know, it was, the reason I said that was because of a previous experience the week before, when I got the call to come to a school. And it was a phone call to a primary school. I knew it was a Catholic school, and I've been to Newham, so they might have assumed things. And I laboured the point that I wasn't a practicing Catholic to the head. And he was saying things like, "Oh, your application's great. Oh, your reference is really good. I'm not interested in that. I just want the best teacher." And then I turned up at the time allocated to have my interview, and that head teacher never came out to see my face. I think the receptionist nearly had a heart attack, because she actually said to me, "Have you come for the cleaning job?" And I just thought, I'm not going to be fazed by that, you know, that's okay. I said, "No, actually, I've come for the teaching job." Okay, but the sad thing about this was that the head teacher never came out to me, and I was there for about an hour in the hallway. So that's why I made that comment to Jim Carr, because I sat there for an hour and he didn't come out to me. Eventually, the said receptionist, who nearly had a heart attack when I said I come for a teaching job, said, "I think there's been a very serious mistake. We thought that you were a Catholic, and the job isn't open to you." So I scuttled down to that situation, went on my way, went back to my head, who was the head where I was on supply at Clothy Street. And he did actually go bananas, and he said, "I'm going to phone them up." I said, "Please don't, because you know what? They don't want me. If they don't want me, I don't want to be there." And that was the end of that one. But after that experience, throughout my applications for promotion, I never, ever went to the school that I was applying to. So I didn't want them to see me because I wanted to be judged by my paperwork and what I'd done. I would send my friends, my husband, whoever was white, to go and hand it in because it was like the thing in those days, because I didn't want to be judged just, oh, it's a black girl, don't look any further, put it in the bin. I wanted to be judged by what I'd achieved and my paperwork. And I did that all the way up until deputy headship, because at deputy headship, I was then again working for Jim Carr. He'd moved schools and he knew me. And certainly for headship, I did not show my face until I got an interview. And I can tell you some stories that will make you laugh. My naivety at that time, I feel, was that I did believe that I could work anywhere because I did believe I was a really good teacher. And after I left Shaw Hill in Allen Rock, I went to work at Wild Green Primary School. Anne Baker, scary lady, NUT president, but I loved her because she was so fantastic with me. And I remember when she appointed me as head of their school, which was quite a prestigious job in Sutton. We had the governors. What's going on? Why's this girl come? I always remember the school nurse coming to me one day and she said, I think it's really nice that we got a TA that is not white. And there I was, head of first school. So, just to give you the flavour of my experience, parents were horrified, I have to say. And I remember walking out, you have to walk out to the playground, collect children, and it was like dead silence. And the head came up to me and she said, I left it for about a couple of weeks. And she said, Anne Baker, I have been waiting for you to knock on my door. And I said, well, I'm ready now. I don't think I can stay here. I can feel the hostility, the animosity, the sort of tension. And, obviously, thank you for giving me the opportunity, but I really don't want to stay here. And she said, we've got a problem here, Baker. How are we going to solve it? And I said, well, I have thought about that if you're up for it. How about letting the parents come into my classroom and help me? Now, I knew Anne Baker kept them on the line outside the school gate. That was not her way. And she sort of said, okay, then, give it a go. Let's see what happens. And parents were allowed to come in and help in my classroom. And to be honest, it didn't take very long to dispel all their anxieties. My first two parents' evenings were amazingly interesting. There was the parent who said to me, thing is, Mr. Packer, we hadn't prepared our daughter for you. And I said, oh, for me? What do you mean? And the mother, and they were both doctors actually, for you, they could have done clap, clap, wink, wink to sort of get the message to me. And then I clicked, and then I said, oh, so she'd never seen Flo Error on the television then. Because I knew what they were getting at. And this child was quite a problematic child who'd got issues, but they felt the issues were because she'd got a black teacher. And then I got another parent who came in and she said, oh, well, we've been looking forward to seeing you because we asked our son what you were like. And he said you were black all over, black shoes as well, and you wore black tights. And I said, oh, I don't wear black every day. And that's how I dealt with things at that point. It was best to just flip it, to joke about it, to not take it to heart, because it was my way of survival. And it's sad now when I recollect on that. And if I'd been Ava now, then I probably would have been sacked because I would have had stand-up rows with so many different people and I would have ended up with no job and upsetting the parents and all the rest of it. But as it was, took it on the chin, always laughed it off. My testimony and legacy for that school in Wild Green was the fact that when I was leaving to go to another school, the parents complained why he had to go. That to me was the best thing possible. And I lived in the area by then because one of the parents because once they'd come into the classroom, it dispelled all their worries. And one of the parents used to see me at the bus stop. Anybody who knows me knows I don't drive and I failed about 7 driving tests. And she saw me at the bus stop and she said, oh, where do you live? And I told her at the time I lived over in Thetford, and she said, why don't you come and live over here? And I said, we couldn't afford it. She said, I'm an estate agent, I'll find you a house. And you know what? She did, and we still live in that house today. So for all the negatives, I've also had those positives of really nice people who went out of their way. Anne Baker, for me now, I realise, I didn't at the time, but for me now, I realise that she made quite a brave decision to appoint me. I didn't look the way the predecessors had looked before, and she probably knew she was going to get some slack from the parents, but she took it on. When I was there at first, as head of first court, one of the worst situations I've had to deal with happened. It was dinner time. I went to the bank at the corner of the road, and it was literally 100 yards. I got my bank card and I wanted to take some money out, and then all of a sudden, honestly, all these people on the other side of the counter appeared, and then somebody said, is this your card? And then another person said, why are you using this bank? And I said, I'm a teacher around the corner at Waverley Primary, and they didn't want to know. And that was one of the most humiliating scenarios, because I'll tell you why. Because in that queue might have been parents and carers of children I taught, and they might have misunderstood and made judgments. So, that was really hard and really humiliating. The head teacher then did actually phone them up. I never ever got an apology. I did get my card back and the money that I was trying to draw out, because in the kerfuffle when I left, they didn't even give me the money I was trying to draw out, and kind of scuttled back to school. So I've had some experiences, and what we've got to remember as leaders is people have outside influences that affects them and impacts on them. By the time I was deputy, I had another unfortunate incident. It was a really hot day. The house had been broken into, and I went to try and price up some new locks, and the machine it was like the equivalent of being Kibra, I can't remember what it was called. The machine kept going, the machine attached to the door kept going off, as if to say someone had got something they hadn't paid for. And I watched this, it went on for quite a few people. Everybody giggled and, oh, come. And then there I am in a summer dress, no big handbag, tiny little purse. And my husband was in the car park waiting for me. And they stopped me, and I was sent to the back office and searched. And can I just say, though, at that moment, all I could think about was, I hope there's no parents from our children seeing this, because how am I going to deal with this? That was a different scenario, because indeed I wrote a very strong letter about their processes and why that happened to me, not all those other people I'd seen. And I had a handwritten apology that arrived, and you wouldn't believe the person who brought the letter had been one of my parents from Margrave, who actually worked in the office there, and she sort of said, oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, I did milk it. I made sure that Marshall got lots of freebies from their gardening section and all the rest of it. But the point was, it's almost like you live parallel lives. And I know there'll be people in the audience who will resonate with that kind of living parallel lives. By the time I was looking for headships, I'd had many embarrassing moments like that. Finally got to St Mary's, and it was in a bad place. And when I went for the visit, the children burst out of the classrooms, and I decided I was going to withdraw, because I said, you know what, I can't deal with that. That's just a little bit too much for me. And I went to my mum's, which was just 10 minutes away, and I told her, and she said, that's the school that needs you. That's the school you should go to. And then you've got your St Mary's logo and your St Michael's logo. And 5 years during my headship, the latter part of my headship, I was executive head teacher and ran both schools. I was a bit of an idiot, I have to say, because I was operational head for both sites, silly girl. Because we couldn't get anyone appointed to St Michael's, I couldn't let any random person who wasn't good enough be in that role. So I decided I'd do both roles for the school. I've got fantastic staff at the time who were totally supportive of me, and it was a challenging situation, but not one that I regret. I'm glad that I pushed myself enough to do that. That the man who's in the photograph with me, and I hope all you ladies and gentlemen love my little sparkly top, was our chair of governors who appointed me, and was chair until, you know, my last few years of headship. So Father Brian, you know, I have so much respect. I had some very challenging governors as a head teacher, actually. I've got Sheila Lynham, ex-head teacher at St Albans School, got Mary Edwards, ex-Dyson director. I've got people who knew education and could challenge me. But you know something? They were amazing. They were amazing and supportive and challenged and did it in the right way to push me on. I know in my heart of hearts, the only reason that St Mary's got outstanding at the last inspection I did with them was because Father Brian got me in the corner and he said, what do you think we're going to get? And I said, well, I'm really, remember, we were special measures and then we were all right and we got good. And I'm more than happy to get good with a few little bits of, you know, he said, you need to get outstanding. And I listened. And I thought about why he said that and what it would mean to our particular community and to that staff. So there we are at St Mary's. I left St Mary's 2017, 5 years ago now. I think I probably left for the wrong reasons, because I think I had a little bit of burnout from running the two schools. But my recent experience of being the executive head at Ladypool has energised me again and, you know, made me remember what headship was about. I'm now ready not to be a head, but clearly in my heart, in my mind, I wasn't ready then. So over to you, Sukhbir, with some questions.
First, I just want to say, you know, listening to your story, Ava, certainly resonates with me. I'm sure about the profile of people listening today, but there's so much there that just so inspiring to go through some of the challenges that you clearly face, and you use the word survival, and to have to use those words, you know, you just ask yourself, well, you can only imagine some of the challenges that you went through. And if you were to change, would you change anything that you experienced looking back over your career?
Looking back, there are some things I would change, and that's my own personal demon. I would not sacrifice my two children's time with me for being the head teacher, all-consuming, driven head teacher that I was. I would probably not be, flattered by the false flatterers who came into my life at different stages and were really users. I think I would not be so hard on myself. I was very hard on myself. However bad somebody can make me look, I can make me look worse. However the challenge is, or however good the report is, I'd always think, oh, I should have done that. And I wish I hadn't been that person, something. I wish I'd been kind to myself, because that would have helped me. And also not looking over my shoulder all the time to be caught out, because in my heart, I didn't feel good enough. That's what I would change. I would have more confidence in myself, more self-belief, give my family more time, and embrace the successes that I did have during my headship, instead of always slapping myself for the things that weren't good enough. That's what would change.
And who would you say, as you look onto your career, was your inspiration, your role model, who you sort of held in high esteem? Thought, you know what, that person really inspired me to be the person that I am.
I've got to go right back to my mum. You know, my mum was had high aspirations for us as children. She was very ambitious for all of us. I can tell you a lovely story where Michael, the next one down from me, was at Birmingham City as a footballer, and the next of my brothers were the twins, David and Derek. And she thought, I'm not having this football business. So she wrote a letter to the school and said, my boys will not play in your football team because they are going to go to university. That was my mum. That was my mum's makeup. My dad had got very strong work ethics. He was never ill. I think he was ill, but still went to work. And that was embedded in us as well. I have been so lucky to have had some really special people in my life along the way. Jim Carr, who was my first head, and also the head that I was deputy to. Paul Bennett at the National College, who I can remember the conversation with Paul Bennett. Would you like to come and be part of the head teachers reference group at the National College? No, it's not really for me, Paul. And he nurtured me and encouraged me, and he said something like, well, just come to a meeting and see how you feel. And it, you know, those people who kind of believed in me. Tim Brighouse, in a funny way, when I was deputy, I met him and he came to open our school library because I was head of reading and English. And I remember I stood up and my belt, I've got this little gold belt, it snapped and fell to the floor. And I kind of went, oh, at least it's not my pants. And Tim actually was so good to me, encouraging me. And when I became, he did actually say to me that night, we had such a laugh, you're going to be a head teacher, you were. And I thought, because I was so happy being a deputy, because I've got an amazing head who allowed me to grow and do things. And he said, you'll be a head one day. And I'll never forget, he came to visit me at St Mary's when it was in special measures, and he said, I told you you should be a head, but why here? God's sake. You know, it was that kind of conversation. And also Tim looked beyond the academia, the wider picture, the nurturing, the community cohesion, and all those things that we still haven't sorted out were being talked about all those years ago. And he was definitely really important to me. And I suppose for many years, my experiences have been, you know, checkered outside of school as well as inside of school. When I say inside of school, I remember I came from a meeting and I was going to the main school gate at St Mary's, and someone was trying to deliver a package and he kind of pushed in front of me, and I thought, okay. So then I said, oh, I'm trying to go into the school as well. And he said, yeah, but I've got a parcel to deliver here. I need to go first. So I let him go first. He got into the entrance. I went into my office and I always got my obligatory jacket, suit jacket. I took off my suit jacket and I went, I'm the head teacher. And it's those moments when actually, you know, I have people turn up. I call them canvassers to sell their wares. It might be a project, it might be equipment, it might be an idea. And they would always, I'd be there next to one of the admin staff, receptionists, could be, and they would always ignore me and look at that other person and conduct this conversation. Sadly for me, there was one of my admin staff who loved it and you know, she played the role and gave them the answers. One of the others who has known me a very long time and our children went to school together, she would say, that's the head, not me. And it's all those situations that you take with you, Sukhbir, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, doesn't it? And it's that sort of philosophy, really. So yeah, I would change a lot of things, but more about myself than anything else.
I totally get what you said there, because when I started trying to get to primary schools, call it naive, call it what you like, I would say my name was Sukhbir. I could not get past the secondary. Still another said Mr. Farrar. They weren't sure.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
The first time I got through is when she never says Sukhbir Farrar with silence. It's not, I'm Asian, by the way. So no, I didn't mean.
Yeah.
So I completely get what you're saying, because those experiences, certainly when I was going through my career, you had to learn to navigate
Yeah.
your way through to try and get through to wherever you need to. So if I was to ask you to share some golden nuggets to help others who are probably looking to aspire to leadership or something, what would you say are 2 or 3 golden nuggets to hold on to?
Yeah, what I'd say is, first and foremost, be your authentic self. Know yourself and know the people that you want around you who will be supportive in the vision for the school. And actually, I'd also say, when you've made a mistake, hold your hand up and say, that's a mistake, we need to go in a different direction. I learned very early on, probably from my previous head teacher when I was deputy, that in school, if things go well, it's the staff, you praise the staff, and if they go wrong, you take it on the chin. And I would say you need to understand that as a leader, and to know that if you've got a vision, you need to keep revisiting that vision and verbalizing it to take people with you. And there's such a lot of talk over the years about distributive leadership. That's great if you've got somebody to distribute to who's capable. And so I'm very much thinking, use your common sense and be real, and know what your moral purpose is and what you want to achieve for your school and your school community, because actually the children only get one opportunity. I feel blessed that I've, in some small way, touched lives of many children, but you've got to be single-minded and not sort of be coerced into doing everything that everybody else is doing. That's one. You know, I've seen so many examples of heads. Oh, I said, why are you doing that? Oh, well, everybody in the consulting is. Oh, they're not doing it. And I think, but is it working for you? And one thing that probably really got on people's nerves within the local authority, but kept me sane, was that I would never do something because I was told to. I would reflect on it, examine it, and say, how can I make it real in context of my curriculum, my children, my parents, and the outcomes?
Sound words. Beautiful.
We can, I'm just reflecting on everything. I've been writing loads of stuff down. We're fine for time. 30 minutes if we want to carry on. We can invite colleagues out there. Great to see all 45 of you, which is brilliant. If you want to put on the chat line questions,
Yeah,
or Ava or something.
Something I'd like to further is your love for the arts, Ava. And I think that's something which, you know, whenever you walked into some areas, you could just see that the performing arts and dance and music was something you were very passionate about. Where did that interest come from? I'm not really
That's no, it's got to happen. Well, let me be clear, it was not my original idea.
Oh.
I had a teacher who, I think Jenny was a middle leader at that stage, Jenny Savannah Hall, who came to me and said, I want to do a salsa class. And I thought, is that something you eat? Can you see a cooking class? And she meant dance. So she started this class, and I could not believe the quality of the dance from the children. And that led me to say, we need to showcase this. So what we'll do, Jenny, is we'll take your idea and we'll have a dance concert and sort of pick things from other classes. So it actually becomes a unit. And that was the start of something very special for me, because for me, dance transcends diversity, cultural identity, all the others, because dance is with music. And what I would say is as well that dance is not just dance. So, because if you do a dance in a hall and you've all got black leotards on, that's very different to dressing in the role. It's very different to having the right music that kind of tells the story. And that, you know, thank you, Jenny Savannah Hall, because Jenny I know is a main scale teacher again now, and she got as far as deputy headship. And you know, it's at that point I would say I worry about global majority leaders who get to a certain stage and then something happens and they never get a second chance. and Jenny's very much one of those people. I've got another friend, Jenny Clark's, and that happens a lot, but that's another subject. I think dance brings faith together, cultures together, also interpersonal skills, confidence. And you know, in the curriculum now, in Ofsted speak, it says, and what do they remember? You know, dance, you have to remember the steps. So again, it ties in beautifully. For me, it grew and grew over the years, so much so that at one stage, St Mary's was used to open the head teachers conference in Birmingham. And my husband, Chris, tells me I'm always half empty. And what he means is I'll always find fault with myself. So anyway, we had all these, you know, you have a questionnaire about the conference. And then I noticed one head said, everybody's got children who can dance. And I thought, oh, you know, like there's dancing and dancing. And, you know, what I would say is that it was a gifted and talented showcase for our particular school. It was the best of the best. I actually got parents who would come to our school, putting their child down for reception, and do you know what they said? I say, why have you chosen this school? And I'm thinking, such results, I've stared, and because you do the dance concert. And we actually got people who wanted to come to the school because of that. And it was also an occasion where our children could speak in their home languages. So in the introduction, they would speak in Punjabi, in Urdu, they'd say "Gwa Gwan," and it was that kind of, you know, embracing cultures that happened. Last night, I think, I'm not sure if it was the BBC or the ITV, it's a programme called We Are England, and there was a young lady on there last night, Miss Nadia, who was one of my volunteers who used to come and do dance with us at St Mary's in the early days. And my very best friend in the whole world, Helen Holton, she's a cheeky madam just like me. She went to like a drinks thing at the Royal Ballet in Birmingham, and she said to whoever was being, like, you know, entertaining, well, I know a school where a head would want ballet in her school, and da, 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 da. And she was the one who orchestrated that St Mary's actually engaged with the ballet. That's very, very much now normal in Birmingham, but we were one of the first schools who actually did that. And I think we started with the adults leading, but we ended up, by the time I was leaving, with the children being the choreographers, the children doing the script, the children choosing the music. And so to me, it impacts on standards in maths, English, science, and all the other things by performing.
It gives you an identity as well.
Yeah.
It gives children those experiences which will stay with them, you know, for the rest of their life. Holistic style, which, you know, education's one thing in the classroom. There's those out of class experiences, which I think are just so powerful.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So here, I'm going to tell you something. Many years ago, I was interviewed for the Times Educational Supplement. I've been ahead for a few years. And the interview was Sue Robinson, who was a neighbouring head teacher who was ace. And she said to me, when I saw you at the induction for new head teachers, you said, I want my children to go to the ballet and the theatre and listen to classical music. Why did you say that? And actually, I felt by the time I left headship, those experiences had been given to those children, because it isn't just about your basic skills and your outcomes for exams. It's also about you as a person. And actually, one of the things we do in schools, and I do believe it starts in the early years in role play, is that we are preparing our pupils, our students, to be parents or aunties or uncles or somebody who is a nurturer in the family. And I think if we take that really seriously, you know, where people might, you've got 3 generations of people in this city who've never been to work in the way we see going to work. But actually, if we empower them to be good at their parenting skills and embracing that, that has an impact on our society as well.
Because, I mean, you talked a lot about your own teaching experience, schools and access to that. Well, in addition to that, you've also been expected.
Yeah, didn't like it much, but if you want me back, Ofsted, I'll come though.
Adam,
What made you go down the Ofsted route and how come did you do?
To be fair, I went down the Ofsted route because of the badge, and because the badge kind of gave you credibility. And at that time, I was a national leader, and I've got school-to-school support going on, and that would give you that kind of credibility. But also, naively, I thought I would learn so much from it and from that experience. And what I learned about myself was that actually I'm not good at firing the bullets and leaving the bodies. I need to be a person who actually then, you know, follows it up and says, you know, this is what you do. Don't get me on about Ofsted, because I just think it's, you know, inconsistencies. It's some people who, it's a bit like the Gospels, you know, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, they've all got the same experience, they're all saying the same things. And that's how I see Ofsted people sometimes, depending on their personality. They'll read the same script, but get a different thing from it. So yes, I thought it was good to get the badges up there.
Can I do some live reporting from the chat line, please? So I hope I get the pronunciation right here. From Janicia Shirley. She says, wow, it feels weird to call you Ava now, Mrs. Sturridge-Packer. I left St Mary's in 2013, and the things you taught us kids are still so relevant in my life. Forever my head teacher and forever an inspiration. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, that is so lovely.
That is a lovely message, and it's about the impact of teachers.
Can I tell you a little story though?
No, 1 minute. Hold on, no. Yeah. Nikki's laughing here in the corner off screen, but there's a lovely similar message from Amador Butcher, who you taught back in the day at Hampstead Hall there. And Amador married Dave Butcher, and so you've set up Dave. She still refers to you as Mr. Farrar, even now. And, set up Dave with a lifelong love of maths, which enabled him to become an actuary. So that's what he does. He actually applies the trade.
Wow.
It's nice. I've got a lovely closed question here. This is a yes/no answer. Right.
Hurts my lips.
This is Stuart Kearney from Music Land Services for Education. Thank you very much. Did you play the piano in your house?
Well, I did, but I wasn't trained to play the piano because it was just there to just touch the keys. However, there is a story about this. We used to have a talent show at St Mary's every Christmas, but it couldn't be anything you did in school. It had to be something you brought from home. And I was like the Simon Cowell who sort of said, no, not you. No, we've got to have standards. And this child came up and he said, I'm going to play the piano, Mrs. Packer. And I went, have you had lessons? He said, no. I said, so how are you going to play the piano? Have you got a piano? He said, no. And he went on to the piano and played really well. And I said, oh my goodness, how did you do that? And he said, in the loft of the keyboard that doesn't work, and I taught myself. That's a story, isn't it? Because that child then was able to get tuition from my teacher who did assemblies and played the piano to firm up that skill. So
nice one. Got lovely messages from Zoe Johal and Nicola Turner. Thank you very much for all of your contributions here. Bring it right up to date. So this is from Kadim. He says, I was in St Mary's just this afternoon, observing my chorister singing teacher delivering free singing lessons. The whole school community is really behind our work. Jenny is our choral lead and she's incredible. Your legacy continues.
oh, that's really lovely.
That's quite moving, isn't it? Right back. We have a question from Steve Edmonds here. He says, thanks to Ava, thanks for sharing your inspirational story. He's not going to ask you about your governors, don't worry.
Thank goodness for that, Steve. Don't go there.
No, nothing to do with governors. He says, it's a good question, this actually. I wonder of the many changes to the school system and education policy you've seen in your long and distinguished career, which do you think have been the most positive and which do you regret the most? So
Gosh,
Good policy, bad policy.
that is a really hard one. For me personally, league tables was not a positive thing. And I think it was destructive in the sense of measuring what I don't think are the most important aspects to measure about a child's experience. I can't say the national curriculum was a bad thing, because actually it, you know, over the years I've seen it degrade standards. In terms of Ofsted, the naming and shaming for me is hard. Is hard. And I've been there, and I've, you know, been a part of the picture. And it's about, when are they going to recognise schools are places of growth, of emotional growth, of social growth, and not just outcomes for SATs. And that's a bit that I think we've got the balance wrong now.
I think that's a great answer, and I'm glad we have a transcript here. We do have a transcript, because a couple of people, Amajob, touched on this, and Krama Iqbal has just said, I wonder whether we can persuade Ava to write up her biography. The professional, of course, but the personal, especially as a legacy of the Windrush generation. And I feel from the university end, we should be asking you to do that. Ava's swallowing. You know, the Leadership Academy, it's about many things. It's about capturing that authentic leadership journey so that others can understand your experiences, and we capture them, because there's a danger of losing them, to be honest, and we need that transmission of all those things you talked about, and they're all written down on transcript already, so it's going to be easy, Ava.
No, you know what, Colin, there's something I've never told you, right? Okay, when I've been teaching for a few years, I enrolled on a master's degree for education and went to the meetings and dropped out.
Is that here or
No.
up the road?
It was up the road.
Up the road.
And I didn't feel it was doing anything for me to make me grow. And then years later, I enrolled to do a Bachelor of Philosophy. And I have to say, the truth of the matter is, if I didn't withdraw, I think the tutor would have thrown me off, because it was very clear that what I got to say, because it hadn't got research documentation behind it to validate it, didn't really matter. And you know, Colin, we've talked about research, but I've got an answer now. Last week, Beth did a session with head teachers about research, and now I understand what I don't like about it. You look at the sample, you look at who they are, you look at how many. And what for me was wrong with both those stitches was that I was saying things and they weren't getting it because research had been done about it to validate what I was saying.
Right, okay. So I will just respond to that briefly, then hand over Sukhbir with some towards wrapping up here. One of the things I've learned at uni, and very much encouraged and supported by the two bosses I've had here, by Julie Allen and Deborah Udell currently now, is that there are many different kinds of research. And in the sense, what we're doing here now, tonight, is research, because it's capturing authentic experience, as I said earlier. And yes, we need that large scale and small scale sampling and so on. But equally, I mean, in the book, in the Birmingham book we got together, there's 6 central chapters, and chapters from colleagues like Emma Knights, Kramath himself, Kamal. They're all telling that journey of what happens in Birmingham's 450 schools to inform where we go next. So it's real.
No, it's kind of gets it now.
Ali G, thank you. This is keeping it real, and that interrelationship between the more conventional, traditional forms of research and this form of research. So I think it's really powerful in terms of validating your journey here tonight. So that's me. I'll hand over to our chair.
I mean, still got caution now. I want to ask you, talk about validation. You are also a Sturridge-Packer, one of the judges for a teachers. So, in terms of giving back to the community, I mean, that is something that you do voluntarily, don't you?
Oh gosh. Sukhbir, you know my husband's Chris, and we have many discussions about why you're doing all these things, because you're volunteering and you're taking up a lot of your time. But I feel that's my way of giving back. And being a judge for the National Teaching Awards, anyone who, there was an article in Schools Weekly where I describe how I got to be a judge. They kept phoning the school, and I said to the office, I don't want to deal with people selling things. You back them off, you back them off. And this teaching awards thing kept coming up and coming up. And in the end, I went, hello, I have told my staff because I do not want to buy anything from you. And they went, oh, we want you to be a judge. It was as simple as that. And I did ask them, I said, how come you've chosen me? And they said, we do research as to who we want. And you've got an article in the Times Ed, and we felt, you know, that embrace. Can I say, being a judge is the most fulfilling thing. You go across the country, I've been to Ireland, and actually you see outstanding practice. You know, I'm not going to lie, because my teaching awards people will know that this is what I say, but also you may see at times, okay, but okay for that school is amazing for them. So it's about sort of, but oh, it's the best job ever. I absolutely love it. One of the funniest things I've learned over the last few years since not being ahead is when I did the 2-year program for the DFE to do with teacher recruitment and retention. Wow, did I change when I said, I made the Sturridge-Packer from the DFE. Oh, the teacher, what's in a label? And that's so cool. It's a bit the same with us, isn't it?
Consensus.
But for me, the point I was trying to make there is that you do so much behind the scenes to want to give something back to children and schools that, you know, I know you, so I don't know how many governing bodies.
I'm on a few governing bodies.
You know, you can trust in.
Summit Trust, I'm the chair of governors at Oakland School. I'm at the Handsworth Grammar School for Boys. Mom, I made it in the back door to the grammar school.
Got there.
Yeah, we got through it. And Marsh Hill, where I was deputy head, I'm a governor there as well, and I'm on the Summit Trust as well. And it's giving back, isn't it? It's up there.
Because the experience you've talked about, you've gone through it yourself, and that personal experience absolutely priceless. And I agree with what Colin's saying is, how can we capture that in a way to inspire others, regardless for me of colour, creed or class, to enable them to support young children, and I use the word our care, because they are our care. And it's almost like we have that responsibility now to pass the baton on to enable others to taste some of the successes, learn from your experiences, and to experience that for themselves and want to think about being leaders themselves in their own right. Because ultimately, as a leader, that's what you want. You want to pave the way for others to lead schools or whatever they feel their role in education is. And I applaud you for that.
Oh, thank you, Sukhbir.
You know,
thank you for that. What I would say is, you know, if you ask me what my legacy was from being a head teacher, it's nurturing children, nurturing parents, to not be talked down to, but to be respected and empowered as partners. And people along the way over the years that I have nurtured to go on into different responsibilities, including parents actually, where we had volunteers who then I managed to organise them to be trained as teaching assistants, or parents who said to me, I want to be a teacher, and I could direct them along the route. And that is really important as well, that we is it time?
I would say about what you just said there, about what you both just said, because Avi, you haven't really explored yet another aspect of your contribution here, because you've spawned a generation of black leaders in the city.
Yeah.
it's like your extended family, and a number of them are online here tonight. And we talk a lot about the demographics of the city, the profile of the communities we serve, the student population. It's way out of line with the demography of the leadership. You two are living examples of what we need to see so much more of. That's what we feel, and that I think as a role model, what you've done at St Mary's and it radiated outwards has given your black colleagues the confidence to think, if I apply for the job, I'll get a fair crack of the way. Well, I don't get the job, but at least I will be treated, fairly and equally in the process. And of course, the talent has come through as a result. So a lot of these people are out here tonight batting for you because you actually shaped their careers, gave them the confidence to go for it in the first place.
And it's testament to yourself, Ava, like 10 to 6. And there have been so many colleagues who have joined this seminar who could have thought, oh, I've got something else to do, busy, it's been a long day or whatever. And that's testimony to yourself, your name and what you have done for the community over decades. It hasn't gone unnoticed. It's changed the lives of so many people, starting from children. And I can only imagine how many children that you taught then came back as parents, and their own children have went through.
Because I stayed at St Mary's for a very long time, so you saw the children of your children. I think there's a lot to be said about staying in one place, understanding the community, the climate of the community, and the two extremes is this. Not long ago, when I was supporting you at Preston, I got out of the taxi with my feet first, and this young man, who till this day I don't know his name, I know who that is. I recognise the legs and the shoes. and I looked up and I went, who are you? He said, you're Mrs. Farrar. And I went, yeah. Till this day, I don't know who it was. But then, just over the last few months, I went to the opticians in Sutton. And I go to the opticians to get my glasses sorted out. And this young man goes, it's you. And then he says to the whole shop, she was my head teacher. And I went, did you go to St Mary's? And he went, no, I went to St Michael's. You came in and you made a difference to us. So you never know. And I feel strongly that it's about how you make people feel inside, and that makes a difference. And I'd like to think that certainly with my children, I made them believe in themselves, because I said, you're going to university, you're the best you can be, you can do this, you can do that. Because all I was trying to do was what I'd wanted for myself as a child. But, that's the thing, really.
And in some way, that's a lovely way to
Okay.
I think on behalf of everybody, we'd like to thank you for being yourself.
Sorry about the academics who thought, goodness sake, what was she on about?
Thank you for everything that you've done. I think it's hard to really encapsulate what you've done in a few words. Thank you for inspiring, believing in young people. When others were closing doors, you kept them open, kept them ajar, to give them those life chances and opportunities, which have made a lot of people go on, progress in whatever career they've chosen to progress in, to be upstanding male and females of society that we are today. So thank you. And I think on behalf of everybody, and long may that continue.
Oh, thank you, Sukhbir. He's only said that because he's my friend. No, thank you, Sukhbir. That really means a lot to me. And from the little 5-year-old who came on the aeroplane all those years ago, I feel that I have grown. I haven't finished growing yet, because there's still growth to have. But I'd like to think along the line, especially at St Mary's, I gave hope and aspiration and ambition to those children and parents.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Around the room, Nikki, our invisible, brilliant professional services colleague, who's been laughing like a drain over here. Enjoy this. So thanks, Nikki, as ever, for making sure all these things happen and come together. Sukhbir, thanks very much for coming along at the end of a very, very full working day at Waverley. You've taken on a huge job there, for which I'm personally eternally grateful. And Ava, of course, thank you so much. If you ever had any idea that you might disappoint, I can share with you, and you'll see all the transfer of comments later. It's been the opposite. You've exceeded expectations here. It's been a tour de force. We've all really enjoyed it. And I might just have to twist your arm about getting the pen out now. So getting it all on paper. Well, you've said most of it already. So, and thanks to everyone out there. Thank you so much for coming. As ever, we'll see you at the next one. You know how I work. We never quite know the date or the time or who it's going to be next, but the show will always continue. Thanks very much and good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Colin, and you, Nikki, and you.
Thank you.